Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of the How podcast. Today, we're very lucky to have our guest, Ratul Sengupta. Ratul, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And as always, you have your lovely host, Elena Anfimova, and myself, Sean Bivens. And so, Ratul, let's get started. I know a question that we like to get started off with is kind of learning about our guest's origin story, if you will. So, tell us a little bit about your time pre-Wharton and what led you to Wharton eventually.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I grew up in India, and I spent most of my early life in Delhi. I had some time in Mumbai also, and my family was a small family, but one that was very involved with each other. My father and mother were both in the services space. My mother was a teacher. My father was in the insurance industry. And we were just a pretty close knit family without a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles close by. So we did a lot of things together. So a lot of my values and aspirations came from looking at my parents, seeing how they sort of handled themselves, what they interacted with, and kind of basing my aspirations on the sorts of things they set as targets for themselves and learning from that. So with that in mind, I got into the accounting space. I thought about doing engineering, then I went and became a chartered accountant instead. And as part of that, there were a number of M&A deals that I got involved in the late 90s that got me very interested in the global markets. And the center of global markets was either London or it was New York. So I really wanted to get to either of those locations to be able to be part of bigger, better deals and be a bigger part of those deals. A lot of the deals that happened in India were a small portion or they were the back end of the deals. So I took the opportunity with a company called HCL to move with them. I was working with them in India and I moved with them to the Bay Area. And that was a crazy, crazy time, Y2K, and lots of valuations going haywire and both directions. And then when the dot-com bust started happening or things started going wrong, I actually moved across the country to the East Coast, and I was in Virginia in the DC area. At that time, I realized that continuous growth. I had done a few deals. I had gotten into a new space called business process outsourcing, which was historically captive to organizations, and those industries, those segments were really growing, with a lot of it growing back home in India and in other countries like Philippines or even near shore to the US. I wanted to manage those businesses. I had moved from finance into trying to understand more management, and I needed my skills to be enhanced. I had watched a lot of leaders and learned from them, and I realized to accelerate that learning, I needed to go to an institution where there was diversity of thought, of people there, the talent obviously to make me better, and that's what led me to Wharton. So I was very focused on expanding the scope of my capabilities, but at the same time making a difference in the areas that I was already working in.
Rato, you're one of my favorite people from Wharton. And one of the reasons for that was that you always smiled and you always were in a great mood, no matter the day, the midterms and whatnot. How do you cultivate that attitude towards life? Or does it come naturally to you?
Some of it is natural. Some of it is also knowing what you can control and living with it, and learning to adjust with it. Right. To me, I'm an eternal optimist. I'm always looking at the glass half full, if I can put it that way. And there is always positivity. I mean, we can get hung up on things that are going against us and get down. And there are times that I feel down, but you're never going to solve a problem or make things better if you just get hung up on the past. We can't change the past. To me, that's always been the principle that I Actually, I learned it from my father, who was in an industry that was heavily regulated at that time. And there was always things that he was dealing with that were unions or there were bureaucracy and stuff. And he always looked at making positive change, even little small steps. And learning by watching him, I could see that there were things that he did 2 or 3 or 4 years ago that resulted in positive impact later on. And I realized that it's not about making the catch right then and there. It's not about instantaneous, right? Today we are getting more instantaneous gratification or wanting it in everything. But right from the beginning, I thought, okay, you know what? If I can bring the right attitude and mindset and I just persist with it, then it will eventually make an impact. If I'm also negative and others are negative, we'll never make progress. So I realized that reasonably early in life, and it was a socio-economic, it was cultural. Growing up in a country where number of people was not an issue, it was about the attitude and the mentality. And very honestly, India in the 90s was a hotbed of innovation. There was so much talent, and that was finally ready to break out. So I was a little bit of a product of that mentality itself changing, but maybe I imbibed it and I used it to my advantage. And I just felt, my time at Wharton, I was so happy. I was blessed in the sense that I didn't necessarily have to come in and look for a job the same way as many others did. I had the benefit of an open opportunity to go back to. Once that pressure was off, I was able to really enjoy my time by interacting with folks. To me, the ability to interact with folks like you with your background, or folks from different parts of the US or other parts of Asia, Africa, that was it was a new experience every day. And that was so joyful that I guess that framed my attitude for the 2 years I was there. That, every day I got to learn something different about a country, a culture, a mindset. And it just made me happy, So that was it. No secret other than that. Yeah.
I'm curious, Ratul, I'm curious. Um, you have a job that's very hardcore technology, it's very rational. What do you do to express your creative side?
So my favorite question when I talk to my team or even to a client or a prospect is, what does good look like? So I always try and build backwards to say, what are we trying to achieve at the end of the day? And if you can then align all the pieces, and there's people, there's a process, there's technology, there's about will, and there's about putting the resources in place for it. I always try and focus from the end objective. And then, of course, there are always certain things that you can't change physics. You can't change certain aspects of how things can get done. There are laws and regulations and requirements for every industry or every country. But with that end in mind, it makes your role easier. If my end in mind is to drive more growth, I do a lot of work within the sales channel and creating solutions within the services space. If my goal is to create a set of solutions that makes life different for folks in the insurance space or folks in the healthcare space, then the objective is clear. I'm making X person's life easier. I'm making so and so job faster and better than it was, and creating a small difference or making the world a little better for them. That makes everything worthwhile. And with that objective in mind, you now distill it down to what are the business needs to achieve that end of objective. A lot of what humans do is based on emotion. If I can influence emotions positively right at the very end, that can be distilled to what the business needs are. And then the bits and pieces that go towards achieving those are easier to understand.
Yeah, and Ratul, I'd love to learn a little bit more about what it is that you're doing now. I see that you're the Chief Revenue and Solutions Officer, but what specifically does that mean, sort of in like a day-to-day function?
Okay, so I work with a company called Sitel. Sitel is approximately 4.5 billion in revenue, about 150,000 people globally, 29 countries, and it's been in business in various avatars for 30 plus years. Recently, we completed an acquisition where we got another company that was very well known in the industry, a family owned business with their name on the door, and lots of emotions and people and talent that came together. My role is really to drive new business growth, and new opportunities of solutioning to deliver business impact. And that's the way I measure my job, is what business impact have I delivered to my clients. And I measure business impact with how have I helped my clients increase the revenue from their customer base, reduce their own costs so they can become more efficient and productive, and have more to offer to their clients. Um, get more customer stickiness. There's this continuous battle on how we acquire customers and retain them, right? We think back, Lena, at lifetime value of customer in marketing, and how does it really get applied in real life, right? The agent or the salesperson isn't necessarily thinking of it in a formula term. They're looking at it in a relationship term. How do you really drive customer stickiness, client stickiness? And then finally, innovation. So much of the millennial generation goes towards brands based on how innovative they think they are, right? Whether it's social media networks and adoption of those, what my kids use today versus what we might be using is different, not because what we are using is bad, but because they feel what else they've got is more innovative, it's more addressing their needs, and it's pushing the envelope. So if I can have the conversation and make my solutions help with revenue, cost, client stickiness, and innovation, I feel that's a good way of approaching it. So my day-to-day job is working with my team, with clients, with prospects, in terms of defining what good looks like, how I help it drive, how I help my solutions drive business impact for them and their businesses. And if I can make that individual or those set of individuals in my client more successful in their objectives are usually around taking care of their customers. We are making positive impact, we're making them successful, and that therefore we're making ourselves successful. At the end of the day, it's a people business, and it's about individuals feeling good and wanting to work with you and feeling that they benefit from it positively. So while I'm in sales, while I'm in solutions, I feel very much I'm in delivering business impact, but also delivering positive impact to the individuals in my clients, and how they would perceive us, and benefit from interacting with us. And if I can establish that, then the rest of the mechanics becomes easy. It's not just about pure numbers and contracts and things like that. Yes, those are principles you have to follow in the economy, but that is secondary to relationships and achieving objectives at a personal level.
Ratul, you mentioned these big changes in India. How does it make you feel to live so far away from home?
Yeah, that was a tough decision. There were, for me, the number one priority is family, and like I said, making a positive impact. Um, After I went back to India, I went back right after Wharton. We got married in 2005, and we had our kids almost back to back, 2007, 8, and 9. So we had young kids, and we had some family. My parents, my wife's mother, they were close by. So that was amazing. There was a period of time, though, that my role was requiring very extensive travel. And I was spending almost half the year, maybe 160, 170 days, traveling internationally. And that was not just physically demanding on me, but those small moments with the kids, which are what we always want to see, were being missed, small ones. Luckily, I never missed a birthday or an anniversary, or something. I always prioritize that. But when kids are growing up, you want to be with them as much as possible. Obviously, we all have to work also. So there was a time at which my wife and I were talking, and I was like, I spend a majority of my travels in the US. Why don't we move here? That way, I don't have to leave on a weekend and come back on a weekend. That little bit of travel time, it's 25, 27 hours cycle time to get to India or from India to the US. I can save that. And that's one of the reasons we moved to Texas, which is I was like, here it's central, that I can physically go to either coast and back in the same day if I have to. Not that it's always easy, but it's a location which makes it fantastic. It was a location that was similar in weather, and the people here are amazing. To It was similar in weather to Delhi where we grew up, so it was comfortable, and all the little aspects of proximity to clients, not having to travel as much, a good place to live in, made the big decision easier. It was not easy though. We thought about it, and my company at that time asked me to move maybe 3 or 4 times, and I said no. And I realized from a career perspective and from just mental sanity perspective and being with the family as much as possible, we needed to be here. So mid 2010s we kind of moved here, and there's lots of amazing things. There's so much more time we spend with the kids now. They're all teenagers or about to be. The third one's about to become a teenager, so it's just watching them grow. My kids now consider themselves Americans and Texans. They've spent a majority of their lives here, so I think it's been for their benefit. And at the end of the day, for each one of us, we want to leave the world a better place for our kids, and we're hopefully achieving that. Not to say India isn't great. It's still my country of birth. I have family. I have so many relationships there and so many memories. I go back whenever I can, but for my kids, the US is now home, and I think they're the better off for it, because it's still very much the land of opportunity in so many ways, and just the diversity of culture and talents and people just around me in my neighborhood. People have moved from all over the country, all over the world. It's not about racial diversity or gender diversity or it's there. It's already there. If we just allow it to foster, the next generation and the next generation is going to make the world a better place for us. We just have to give them the opportunity. So it's always for with that in mind that we try and determine what our actions is. How can we make it better for our kids, who in turn make it better for the world overall.
Yeah, it seems like you had a very good, diverse experience while you're at Wharton. If you could kind of extract like one biggest learning or experience that you took from Wharton that you even still use today, what would it be?
My biggest learning was when I went in, I thought I was pretty good in everything I did. And I realized very quickly I was average. There were way smarter people than me. But what that taught me was, going in, I did not know what I did not know. It's whether it's youth or it's just not having visibility. I came out of Wharton firmly aware of where my strengths and weaknesses were, and very, very comfortable with asking for help and working in teams. To me, as a manager, knowing that I'm not the smartest person in the room on every topic and being humble enough to ask for help has been the biggest learning. And to me, the combined power of teams across countries, across cultures, across different levels. There is no level when I talk to my team. The junior most or the youngest or the most inexperienced person has an equal right to speak up. Very frequently, we get a perspective from them that we as tenured folks might have ignored because we might have taken it for granted. And the ability to inculcate dissent in a discussion till you get to an agreement and then simply focus on execution, it takes away self doubt, and it takes away rethinking later on, such that the implementation of any idea, once it's gone through that rigor, becomes so much better. And it's all the company, the organization always benefits from seeking out all perspectives. So for me, Wharton was the location where I really learned that, whether that was in my learning team, or it was in other groups, or it was in the lectures and other discussions where diversity of thought and disagreement with logic was encouraged. And that allowed us to look at somebody's perspective with their talents and their experiences behind it, and imbibe that in what we were trying to do. So to me, that was the number one thing that even every day I use that more than perhaps a principle of finance or management, or that becomes part of the ecosystem, that becomes the river that we are using on a day. I don't think I pull out a book and use a formula or use a model consciously. It's just part of my life. But more than that, I try and use the principles of how do I make it better with having everybody contribute to it, and knowing that I will never have all the answers in a situation where a decision has to be made. And sign of leadership and a test of leadership is always making decision with incomplete information. It's not that I don't have the ability or the courage to make the decision, but being able to rely on the opinions of a team, and trusting the instincts of others, not just having to think you're doing it yourself, was a significant learning for me at that time in my career and life, and one I'm eternally thankful for all my classmates in sort of interacting with me in that way. And that was amazing about Wharton. It still is, I think, that diversity of thought and the interaction ability with the diversity of cultures and backgrounds. I think it's still the best business school in the world.
Ratul, how do you bring up your kids so that they to instill these principles into them?
I, for us, our family is the center of our universe for my wife and me. And we we have three girls, and they're, like I mentioned earlier, with their birth years, they're very similar in age. So for us, they're growing up together, slightly different experiences for each of them. Each of them is obviously an individual. We try and let them make their own decisions on what they want to do or not want to do, within bounds. Obviously, there's certain limits. They might want to do dance or ballet one year and decide, 6 months later we're going to give it up. It's not about cost. It's not about competition. It's not about, oh my God, look at all this time we spent on it. It's your decision. You make it. Think about the positives and the negatives. And I came into the family mentality, and I talked about it with my wife, and I said, I don't want to be the father that says no to anything, but I also don't want to be the father that says yes to everything for the sake of saying yes. If there is a reason and a logic for it, we can only share our experiences and teach them by doing, right? You can communicate with words, but words mean different things to different people. The best thing for kids to see is you acting in a particular way, and they learn from it. I learned from it from my parents. My wife learned from it from her parents. Whether it is small things around, hey, do I leave the glasses on the counter or do I put it in the dishwasher, right? Do I speak politely to somebody who comes to the door to deliver the Uber Eats or DoorDash order, or do I just wave them? These small things impact how kids will in turn interact with others. How do my wife and I interact with the person at the restaurant, whether it's the front desk or the server or at a hotel? We've traveled extensively with our kids, shown them all the things we can. And I see them becoming young ladies, imbibing a lot of the same methods and behavior we do. So that's the biggest learning thing. You give them the room to expand beyond it with certain limitations, and you're always there as the safety net if they make a mistake. We're getting to an age where, as a father, I'm scared about boyfriends and other experiences that they'll have. But I trust my kids. I'm not monitoring them on a day-to-day basis. I tell them, you want to go My daughter went to her first home, my eldest daughter went to her first homecoming dance the other day. And then she said, I want to be hanging out with my friends and I'll be back home at midnight. So my wife was like, oh my God, she's 14. Do we want to do that? I'm like, let's trust her to do the right thing. Because when I was growing up, the folks who did the most extreme things amongst my friends were the ones who had the most restrictive parents who God said no for everything. Making it something that they get a high out of just breaking the rule will sometimes incentivize bad behavior more than allowing it to happen within bounds and giving them the right principles to do it. So that's my aspiration is, can I have my kids make the right choices, because I'm not going to be there with them every single time they have to make a choice. And if I can equip them as better human beings and as better individuals to make decisions, I've succeeded as a parent. And of course, I'm always going to be the safety net for them. They are my kids. I mean, I love them till the day I die, and that's part of the principles I learned from my family, and hopefully they realize it as we grow up on some of the sacrifices my wife and I have made for their future. But it's always been with the right intent. It's not something we try and throw in their face as a way of, I told you so. It's about, just like I want to make the world a better place for myself, I want to make it better for them and then teach them to do the same for the generations after that. So it's definitely an interesting time. Besides our three girls, we also have five dogs, all of whom are female. So in my household, there is a little bit of a lack of diversity besides me. Uh, but it's definitely interesting times when all of them decide that they're going to go and start jumping around, and I'm still working, from home. So it can get fun at times, and it's life. It's memories. It's what we all aspire for, and I can't complain. It's I'm happy, and I'm blessed to have my wife and kids with me the way I do.
Ratul, there's a lot of discussion around, is humanity ready for all this technology, human against the machine? What is your view of the future?
I've always been a science fiction junkie, and I always feel that computers will make our life better. There's When I was growing up, I used to think of Isaac Asimov was one of my favorite authors, and his three rules of robotics, so simple. Once you put that in, they can never go wrong. They can never overthrow the world. But I get it that it's not as straightforward as that. That was, teenager me. There's there's moral and ethical aspects of decisions that are made dispassionately. Um, if I was to put some sort of artificial intelligence into determining who to insure, there will be a class of people deemed not a good risk. And a computer will look at it dispassionately. But there is a social aspect of it, community aspect of it, that computers obviously can't get the nuances right now. In some way, shape, or form, so much of our lives today are already driven by and controlled by computers. It's like a joke I saw the other day, that Jeff Bezos is effectively Santa because he knows your address. He already knows what you buy and what you like. He has drones and he knows your wish list and he knows what your behavior is. He just chooses not to be Santa because his machines allow him to be Santa if he wants. He has the money to do it. If he chooses, no, that's his money. He can do what he wants with it. He can go to space, which is what he's done. So there's a limit to what humans will allow it to do. But in so many ways and shape, 2-day delivery. Think about the unfortunate time of COVID. If we didn't have apps and we didn't have delivery to our door, and all those workers, not just healthcare, but even delivery workers and the folks in the grocery stores and others who did amazing work for the last 15 months. But we survived as a community for something that was never anticipated, and nobody knew how to deal with it. Globally, the world shut down. Technology enabled that to happen in an effective and productive way. And it is making our lives better on a day to day basis, even today. Will it become all consuming? Probably not in our lifetime. Can it get, you see some of these movies and they say artificial intelligence got awoke. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen in our lifetimes, at least. But I definitely feel more and more of our decisions. Self-driving cars, for example, put sitting inside a vehicle, knowing fully well the pictures of what can happen if it goes wrong. It's a big leap of faith. But then, do we not do that leap of faith every time we travel? Because the pilot isn't really flying 90% of the time, right? So, in some ways, we've accepted it because we can't see it. Everywhere else, I don't know, in New York, how many of the trains are still driven by the train drivers? How much of it is AI and machine learning and things like that, right? So many of the things we're already doing, and in some ways, it's I think back at the Matrix, one of my favorite movies. If you're not aware of it, that you're a battery pack and your world is in some sort of a neural simulation, are you happy? I don't know. I So, are we headed down that way? Probably not in our lifetimes or a few more lifetimes after that. But definitely, there will be more and more control from machines in our lives.
Ratul, what do you dream about now?
What I dream about, so I do a lot of work in my community with animals, and one of the reasons we have so many dogs is we volunteer time. I look at small things that can make a difference, right? What can we do from a community perspective? I look at how we have a small garden at the back and we try and grow our own fruits organically. How can I change some of the behaviors for myself and those that I can influence close around me that can make a bigger impact down the road? And and eventually, how can I make a memory of myself for myself or of myself with others that thinks of me positively? I won't say I want to. I don't think I'm big enough or doing enough things to personally leave the world a better place. In small ways, maybe. To me, the dream is always, how can I positively influence others so that when people do think of me, whether I'm not in the room or after my time has passed, they think about me as somebody who tried to do his best. And to me, that's my dream and aspiration from my life. You ask me today or tomorrow or day after, I dream about what I'm going to do with my family in the holidays, how I'm going to engage with my kids over Thanksgiving, over Christmas, over whatever things is important to them, and how you can be a better father and a better husband on a day-to-day basis. I don't think about work and as much, right? It's what we do, and we do the very best we can. But I won't say necessarily I have a certain vision that I must do. If I don't do it, I'll be incomplete. To me, the measure of myself is more with the softer factors of how I interact with and influence my family, my community, and the world around me, even the small pocket around me. I don't know if I can impact world hunger in a way other than a small way. Uh, but every little bit helps, and if all of us contribute, to me, the world's a better place, and that's my biggest. End of the day, that's what I hope to be able to do. I don't know how much I'll succeed in that, but at least I'll try.
Well, that's awesome. Um, Also, I know we're coming close to time, but we have to we gotta ask our famous question, which is, finish this sentence. Wharton is a place where blank.
Wharton is a place where amazing talent from all over the world comes together to ignite so many new ideas. And it's a very necessary institution in making the world more connected and a better place for all of us. There are others that have similar roles, but I definitely think the diversity of thought and the mixing pot of cultures and people is unique. And I just feel that I've benefited so much from it, and I think it's going to be amazing for years and decades to come. So it's just it's a fond memory for me, and it's one that I probably use without knowing 100 times a day in some way, shape, or form.
Ratul, thank you so much for joining us. And we thank everybody, our entire audience, for tuning in, and see you in the next episode.
Absolutely, I love it. Thank you for everything you're doing, and take care. Have a great day, and today happens to be Diwali, so for anybody listening,
Yes.
happy Diwali, and bye.
Happy Diwali.
Take care.
Thank you so much, Ratul.